Okay, today we'll start with SQL Lite first. So we'll just see the SQL Lite part first, which is very important, right? So normally SQL Lite is an open source RDBS normally, and Android have got direct type with SQL Lite database, and you can also use this SQL Lite for small time database needs in your real time too, for small web applications or your desktop applications, wherever you want, right? It is SQL Lite, and its editor is so simple. You can use a minimum joins, minimum indices, right, in using your SQL Lite. The same SQL Lite version is embedded in Android too, right? So yeah, the recent news. Do you guys know that what is the next version name of Android, guys? The 5th version of Android.
After gelatin, you're asking?
I mean, we said Key Lime Pie, right?
KitKat. Oh.
Yeah, it was then changed actually.
KitKat.
It changed to KitKat actually. Yeah, it was Key Lime Pie normally,
Right.
but it got to change because they had a tie-up with a Swiss company.
Right.
So they are going to So KitKat is going to pay the complete marketing price for Android. Yeah. So that's latest news as we have. Right. Just wanted to share this. So yeah. So because of this, right? So you don't have to perform any database admin part or setup or anything in your Android phone. So I'm talking only about Android, guys. I'm not talking about any other BlackBerry or iOS parts. They have their own different things. In Android, it's an inbuilt that you will be having SQL Lite. So buy any smartphone, any tab, or sorry, or any smart gadget or any smart box or any appliance, right? It will have its own SQL Lite database inbuilt. So it will come with the OS of Android itself. So we have seen this part of SQL in our architecture of Android itself, right? Where there is a component of DB, which is SQLite DB, right? And this is the only database which we can actually do all the DML operations, which is database manipulation language operations in our Android, right? So I'm not saying that this is the only database which you can use, but if you want to set up any third-party database, you can do that. But this is the best Android database which you can use for faster performance apps actually, right? So there is one class in our Android which is SQL Lite called as Open Helper. So this is a class which is the only class being provided by Android API. Using this class, you can do any DML operations on your SQL Lite database. Right? We'll be checking out each and everything what we can actually do, right, on our SQL Lite database. So initially, whenever you are going to do database operations and all, right, so try to follow the same architecture, because the one which I am going to show you now is the one which we normally use in real time, right? So always you can actually follow the same thing for your file operations too, right? Always. So yeah, let's go ahead and create. So do you want me to create a new project for SQLite, guys? Shall I? Or
yes, please.
Shall we? Okay, fine.
Yes, yeah.
Let me close the projects. Let me create a new project here. Let me call it as SQL Lite com.sr. Let it API 8 and 17 perfect. Next. We have next here, blank activity, next, main activity, finish. Perfect. Okay. Fine. So let me create a new activity again so that we can make it as a moderator for all DML operations. So let me make it as SQL Lite. Let's make it as splash, like main activity. I hope you know the name of splash screens, right? Splash is something which is like startup screen. We call it as splash screens, right? So let it make it as a splash screen activity publish. And let us call this SQL Lite slash from our main activity class. So let's go to activity here, go to main activity, and in our on create. So let us create an intent. Intent of main activity dot this too. We have something called SQL Lite slash activity dot class. Fine, and then just say start activity of intent. Perfect. So with this we'll be actually getting access to the SQL Lite splash screen. Now let me close all these things. Now let's design this first. Now let's design some business what we are going to do. So let's design something called students database. Now here every time you are going to work with a database, right? So this is going to be same as we have seen in our internal storage or shared memory, right? So once you save something, right, once you create a database or anything, so whenever you want to access the database again and again from your app, right, that will be saved like permanently in your database, in your SQL database of your current phone. That is what happens. And if you don't have any SQLite database, I mean if you don't have the table in your SQLite database, then we are going to create a brand new. So every time, because see, we never know who actually is going to install our app and who is going to use the same, right? So which means whenever you install your app, right, whatever tables you want to create on local SQLite, you should give an access to create, first point, right? And second thing is, if you want to upgrade, we can upgrade on that. We'll see each and everything. So let's decide what we want to do. Let's say we want to show all the, we want to design a students table, let's say, and it will have an ID and name. Simple table where we are going to retrieve IDs and names. And let's take ID as something like this case, which is, let's say it is an integer type and it's a primary key, right? And name, let's take it as some string type or text, right? So this is what is a table we are going to use. And so ID, whenever you say integer and primary key, right, I hope you know that. So your primary key, whenever you design any column as a primary key, it will become a unique and it will be auto incremented over here, right? So let's do that part. Okay, fine. So for this case, what do we need is, first let's take an let's look into something called insert operation, right? Or even before that, we have to create a table. So this is something which we will be checking out, creating a table, and before creating a table, parameters needed. So this is the steps we want to go into. First is parameters, second is create table, and third is insert table. And all these things will be done in something called SQL Lite helper class, a class which inherits SQL Lite, which is called as an open helper class. This is important, right? Now, so first we will check out till this part, insert, and then we will move on with other DML operations, right? Now, so first for that, let me take out two text boxes. So let's take something called number text box, where we are going to give the ID, right? And let's take a name or text box, plain text, and then let's take first button, right? So this text box is something which is a txt ID, and edit text to it's a name, student name, right? So let me take edit text ID here and let me call it as btn something called add. Let's take it as add or insert, anything you want. So adding will actually add or insert the data into the table, right? So this is something which we have add. Now, so this is something which we just are done with our UI, right? So before getting into the corresponding class, right, how to add and everything, right? So before that, what we have to do is we have to create our own class, as I said, which inherits an SQL Lite open helper class, right? We'll see how to do that. So always, whatever activities we create, right, for the corresponding layout XMS, right, the corresponding activity classes will be found, right? So this will be created in our default namespace or package which we normally give in our source folder, right? So apart from this folder, let's create one more namespace to give all the dbcom operations, which is, let me call it as com.sr.dbcom, which is db communications as such, right? Or you can also call it as SQL Lite.db communications, right? Click on finish. Now this is the package which we are going to use for our db communications here. Now let me add new class here. Let me call it as something called CLS DB handler, some class. Click on finish. Right? It's a plain normal class which we have here, right? So why it got created, but it doesn't matter. It sometimes creates here, right? Now you can see here it is com.sqlite.dbcom. We have DB handler. Now first part, what we have to do here is we have to inherit, or which is inheriting in the sense we have to extend it with SQL Lite open helper. So let's do that part, which is extends SQL Lite open helper class. SQL Lite open helper. Now this is something which comes under our Android place under database and SQL Lite helper. Right now here, so in this SQL helper, right, this is an interface. So whenever you it's an abstract class, whenever we extend it, right, so we have to mandatorily override some of the constructors and some of the methods of your SQL Lite helper. The first thing is, let's add a constructor. So let me add a constructor here. So this is a constructor which we have, right? And then you can see there are some more things which we have to implement. I'll just say add and implement the methods. So on create is something which, whenever you create an object of DB handler, right, whatever you want to do will be checking out in constructor first, and then we'll come to on create, and then we'll go ahead with the on update and all, right? Now in our DB handler constructor, so let us see what exactly we can actually pass on. So there are so many parameters. If you don't want, you can just remove and keep one context parameter you want, right? And we'll see how to call these things. Now why do we call this super? I'll let you know. First part is, whenever you create an DB handler class, right, so whenever you create an object of DB handler from outside, we have to pass a context of a DB of our application. Now why do we need a context? Why do we need a context is, whenever we are going to create a database table, right, so for our application context we are going to create a database table, which means our SQL Lite database will be exposed to the current context of application, right? So that context we are going to pass whenever we are going to create an object. Now first thing, before understanding these things, right, let's create a parameters. So in this main parameters are these. So static, let's create a few parameters. So whenever it's a parameters, it is nothing but you have your DB name, right? So you'll be having your database name, you have your table name, right? You'll be having your something called version of your table, right? And you have some columns and all. So these are something which we have to design in our DB handler class. Now they should be final. Now why do we create it static is to make them, right, class variables as such, right? So static final, let me take it as string. It is string, so let's call it as constant underscore. You have db underscore name. So let's take name first, and then give name as students, right? Or let me call it as DB students, which is database students. So here this is something which is our declarations, right? So always try to put a pattern on this so that you can understand it is declarations, some coding standards.
Then I have one question.
Sure, Geeta?
This is Sandhya.
Yes, Sandhya. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Can't we access the database directly?
What do you mean directly? Directly from phone, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, you are creating the table in the code, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
directly go to the database and create.
Yeah, you can access your database from something called DDMS. There is a separate editor for that. When you connect your phone to PC, right, through data cable, right, you can actually access that. But normally, much of database things will be encrypted form in your phone, right? So that will be in that way. If you want to actually, yeah.
We will develop the application using the PC only, right?
I'm sorry, what is it?
We will develop the application using the PC only, right?
Yes, yeah, okay.
So that time, every time if you want to create a table using in the code, it will be tough, I think.
No, you won't be creating it every time actually. You won't be creating every time because I said one more parameter called version, right?
Yes.
So before creating a table, every time it will check whether this database table is already there with respect to this version.
No, I'm not asking about every time. If you see, now you have only two columns called ID and name.
Okay.
But if you have
you're not getting, see, you didn't understand one thing, Geeta, Sandhya, sorry. So, see here, we never know who is the person who is going to use our app. First point, is it right?
Yes.
Now, so what you are saying is, how can I access a database from a phone and create a table, right? Now,
Yes.
we never know who is our customer who is going to create our app. Now, how can we access a phone and create a table? We have to do it using a code. Am I right? Right? Am I right? So, which means every time if you want to change the column or anything, you have to do it through code only, so that whenever he installs your application, that will be updated through your code.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, what you are talking about is something which you are talking about server side. Yes. Server side, everything will be in our hand, which means we don't need any code to update or insert or create any store procedure or anything. We can directly choose an editor and edit something on table, which will be affected across all. Now here what we have to understand is, here we are not going to touch any any internal storage or anything directly. Why? Because we never know who is going to use our app. We have to actually handle everything through our app itself.
Okay.
Right? That is something which you have to remember. So I can say it as a statutory warning whenever we are creating a app, right?
Okay. That is my big question, even for the storage part, when you said the files and all you have created in the code itself.
Yes. That is something which we never, give an access, or we should not think about, okay, how can I create directly something on phone? No, whatever you want to do it through app.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And so this is a DB name, and what was the next one? You have to create a version. So let me create a static final string. You have something called const. So this is something which is a coding standard. If you are defining any constant, define it as a const. And normally you have to insert one more thing called what is the data type. So if it is string, you have to make it as a str, right? String constant as such, which is str string, comma. Now I'm gonna give something called db underscore version. Now this version we are actually giving only for our constructor. Actually, we won't be using inside. So whenever you want to upgrade your, so why do we need this version is, now let us say today you are creating one app and you are happy with what the tables you have created. let's say you are actually increasing your version with multiple functionalities, then you may need to create some more columns, right? Then you will be changing your version part, right? Then automatically what happens is it will automatically the database will be upgraded with the new table creation. That is the reason why we give the version. So let's give, as it is the first version, let's give the 1, right? And then once it is done, then let's take static final string. You have const underscore str underscore. Now let's take table name is equal to, let's say it is students, or normally we make a convention as TBL, which is table students. You have students, right? And then sorry, you have to make it 1 here, right? So you can just say, or you can maybe call it as integer, right, directly, because version anyways, so this version is anyways, it's an integer anyways, but we have to go integer version. Now once you have table, then let's say let's create a column, some columns, static final string. You have const underscore str underscore column underscore, let's say it is ID, right? Or maybe take it as student underscore ID, right, is equal to, let's say the column name is ID, right? Let's give a simple value, and then static final string constant string underscore call name, right? Yeah. So this is these are the parameters which you want. And if you have more columns, right, then yes, whenever you are creating app, you have to create all the columns for sure. There is no other way, because we have to create that, because every time we are going to create a table, right, all these columns should be created as such, right? We'll see that part. Now, yeah, so these are the parameters. So now let's come to constructor first. So this constructor is something which is going to give as a context. So whenever we create an object of our CLS DB handler, right? So by default we have only one constructor, which means we can create an object of this class only one way, that you have to pass a context, right? We can't create it any other way, because we have only one way. We have restricted our constructor with one argumented constructor. We don't have any default constructor as such, right? And then, so here you can see the super. The super call is something which is very important, right? So what does it do is, super call, normally whenever anyone creates a object of this DB handler, right, by default, so the super class, which is the parent class of this class, will actually get initialized with all these parameters. That is why we actually go for direct one-time constructor, so that we can assign them whenever we create a object of this class. So let's create this, which is a context is context. Now the name is, second one is name, which is our DB name. So let's assign the constant. You have here DB name, and then factory. You don't need, if you have any name you can just mention the factory, or you have DB version, right, and you don't need any error handling, right? You can pass on these things. Now these are something which is DB, you have DB name, perfect, version, perfect, and your context. So this will actually take care of assigning all the values you want. Yeah.
So the DB version is something like when you are adding a column, when you are doing some changes to the table, then it will get updated.
Yes, we have to update it normally. We have to update.
That is the thing. So you will change the number as 2, 3. Like.
Perfect. Yes, we'll be doing that.
So I have a question, something like.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you have 2 columns now, you are entering some data.
Okay.
Some 3 columns or 4 columns, 4 rows, you have entered the data.
Okay.
So now, again when you are adding a column
Okay.
and recreating the table, right?
Okay. Okay.
So I
Yeah, which
want the data.
Yes, I got
want
your
the
question. Yeah. So in that column, right, by default there won't be any data.
yes.
If you make it not null, right? So if you make that column not null, right, and if you want to upgrade your current table, right, then obviously your actual RDBMS will come into picture, which means you have to drop the table and you have to upgrade it again. So that part will be doing on upgrade. Whenever any DB version change.
What about the data previously we added?
What about the data in the sense? That data is something, see, whenever user is upgrading, right, whenever user is upgrading, so there won't be any user data which he is going to store, right? It will be app data which we are going to store, so that, right, we are actually, giving some privilege to user to store something, right? Now, if he want to upgrade to latest version, then obviously you have to create it again, right?
Okay.
Now take an example of SQL Lite. What can I?
No, you said e-commerce application, something like grocery store.
Okay, take an example. Yes. Okay. So go ahead. What exactly is there in your mind? Yeah, go ahead.
So you have a items table.
Okay.
You want to add the item ID. Okay, you have added some 5-6 items and you have added the price and all everything, and you want to add the item ID to that.
Okay.
I mean, it is before giving the application to the end user.
Okay.
It is in the developer site itself.
Not exactly. See, when we are talking about e-commerce site, right, everything should be live. Every time, whenever we actually get the details, right, one server operation should be done. Yes, it is true that whatever you have your, let's say, product and its ID, right, product and its ID can be saved locally, right, I'm okay with that. So you can actually display all your SQL. See, how it happens is, I'll tell you now. So let us say you just, at first, right, you just want to show, if you select something like fruits, right, so what we will do is, so let's say already you have some fruits in your SQL Lite database, and you are just showing them in front end, right, and in background what you are doing is you are updating your SQL Lite with new fruits, let's say, right? You getting what I'm saying? Yeah. Because in background, whenever I say, which is like multi-threading, I'll show you how to do that, right? So in background, which is you are connecting to server, and you are getting, if there is any mismatch in your SQLite DB, right, then let us say everything you are flushing out and you are actually updating everything. But till that part, what user is doing is user can see all the details which he have got already, right? First part. Now second part. So if you want to refresh the same cart, what you can do is you can actually have an option to menu option or direct click option that to refresh. So whenever he clicks on refresh, what happens is intentionally you'll actually query server again, get the details, update your SQLite DB, and then show it on screen. This is what happens whenever you refresh. Take an example of your email app itself. All your emails are saved in your SQLite. Like all emails in sense your subject, right? Your short, whether it is flagged or not, these small details, right, will be saved in your database. Now you would have seen recently our Gmail app got upgraded. If you would have seen that, right, you would have got a new update that Gmail has been updated with new images and all. When you have updated that, right, you would have seen one thing, that all the mails it started downloading again. Why? Because there was some new columns and something new with respect to database got happened, and it actually flushed out the old database and new things got downloaded from server. Why? Because there was new columns being added with respect to the old app we had. Same thing if you can take the same example with your Hangout. Yeah, it's a best example. If you take an example of Hangout, right, which is Google Hangout, right? So previously it was Google Chat, right? It was a Google Chat, and recently what they did, they actually they are soon. What will happen is Google Chat will be decommissioned, and Hangout will be the only option to chat across the Google. I hope you guys know that, right? So that's why even in our Gmail or Gtalk, right, it always gives us to upgrade to a newer version. So now, so whenever you go to Hangout, right, the things are different. You don't have something called invisible. The status changes are, are something, they have upgraded to something else. Now, again, whenever you upgrade from Gtalk to Google Hangout, right, again it will download all your contacts and it will save it in your local database. So that is what happens. Every app is the same, but the only thing is, for first time it will download everything and keep it in your Lite database. So that is what happens. But normally the very simple data will be stored in your SQL database. If you are talking about let's say chat, right? So sometimes what you can do, whenever you chat, it have an option to save the chats, right, which will be saved in your local. And whenever you delete clear chat, you can actually clear chat of everything. It won't be cleared from server. It will be cleared from only from your mobile phone, right? It is actually deleting from the local table, right? That is what happens. But yes, you are right. Whenever any version changes, and if you want to sync it again, they have to sync it again, so that it will take some time to sync. That they have to do, right? Upgrading part has to be done. Okay. Fine. Let's finish this. So, if you have anything, Faraki? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So, if possible, we can store the photograph and video.
You can save
database too.
Yes. You can go. Yep. You can
also show. Could you please also show, how can we synchronize? Suppose we are using our own server side, we are using a SQL server, and here because we are using SQL Lite.
Okay.
So how we can synchronize?
No. Synchronize in the sense you have to create the same same columns, same data types. See, synchronization is like you can't actually directly map the database to SQL Lite. No, you have to get each and every cell of that server, create separate row here, copy each and every cell. Yes, that is how you have to do. It is like you have one Excel sheet. If you want to copy it to the Excel sheet, what you will do? You will copy the complete sheet, right? Actually, to us, it is copying every complete sheet. But internally, what happens? Every cell will be copied and every cell will be pasted. We have to do everything here.
Like in my case, like suppose the guy, they go to the field. In field, usually they don't have internet connectivity because they are in somewhere where
they don't have offline. You mean offline function?
Offline. So they collect the data. They collect the data. When they come back, they need to synchronize to the.
Yes, I understood. I got it. It's an offline functionality of any app. Yeah. So what we want is whenever any mobile worker visits a site, right? So we want to do all operations. So whenever the data connectivity is ready, then automatically it will be synced to the server. Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes, then each and every line of code you have to write. There is no other way. Yes, you have to write all that. Right? You have
are we going to learn like how can we do the synchronization?
Synchronization in the sense you have to write logic here by yourself. It is not a separate component which you are going to learn, right? Okay. It is something where you have to continuously check whether data connectivity is done, and if you get the internet connectivity, then you have to write you have to create a separate background process of thread, and in that thread you have to see. It will be like, whenever you make your phone offline, right? Obviously you will be having till which work ID already it is there in server, and what is the new work IDs you have in your local. Am I right? So whatever you have got new work IDs, you have to pick them and synchronize. Synchronization is something which we have to get the logic. It is not something which is a separate component.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And one more thing is, never ever synchronize the complete data of server database to your phone database. Don't do that. Whatever field you think that are important, do only those tables. Okay. Or else what you have to do, if you are actually developing an app for any client, right, then you have to mention that internal storage should be at least some HB or something, right? You can't do it in your social apps, right? Social apps are something, you know what I mean by social apps, right? The app which we use in, we don't have any clients. The normal users are clients to us, right? Like take an example of some Angry Birds itself. Angry Birds is a social app, social gaming app. right? You can't take a chance of eating up so much of memory of any user, right? User will throw the app, that's it. Once he throws app, then that's it, right? You are losing a client. But yes, if you are actually using that for, let's take an example of Domino's, right? Let's say user is going, user have got, the delivery boy got all the, maybe you can also do this app if you want. It's a very good app actually. Like let's say there is a mobile worker in Domino's, right? So what happens is Domino's management gives app and a smartphone to his delivery boys. So what he does is, whenever he gets into the network area, right, he'll be getting, so let's say that mobile worker have got an ID stored in his mobile phone, and the person who is sitting at Domino's office, right, he knows, okay, to this area, whenever he gets any order, he has to deliver that order to that boy, right? Now what that delivery boy will do, he will find the nearest Domino's, will go there, pick the order and deliver to the client. Now here, whenever he is delivering the order to client, right, maybe that whenever he is going to client place, there is no data part, right? Then what happens? So he'll go there, it will go to offline. Now what he'll do, he'll just get some sort of digital signature or some acceptance that okay, this is delivered. Now whenever he gets to network area, then it will be updated to the server by synchronization. This can be done, which is a real-time app, right? So then even for this you have to create a background process and update the things of the new work IDs from your local app to the server. Obviously this will be going on without any stop, right? Fine. Okay, so where were we? Yeah, so we created so any more question guys, so once we resume we'll just take up that. Any more questions? So have you guys started something on working on, you got some questions on this, you can just ask me. You can ask any number of questions, because SQL Lite is something which we are going to learn completely here itself, right? Fine. Okay, no, she said, so let me just resume. And okay, we are done with constructor. Okay, so we are done with the declarations part. Okay, if you don't need, just remove them. And yeah, okay, this part is very important again. You see, so whenever you get any sort of warning, right, that you are importing something which you are not using, always try to delete them guys, right? Because this will actually reduce some overhead, definitely, because we are importing something and we are not using anything in that, right? Maybe if you are developing any desktop applications or something which user is going to use in his machine, which is computer or laptop, that's fine. He is not going to get, because his processing speed will be at least handleable and something. But here each and every micro processing speed have to be counted, right? So okay, so on create, so this is a method where we are going to actually create our table, right, basically. Now here let us see how we can actually create a table. Now you can see here SQL Lite database. So this is the class which we are going to use across all the DML operations, which is SQL Lite database, right? So initially whenever we are at on create, right, it will directly give the handle of SQL Lite DB. Now this SQL Lite DB is something which we are getting as a reference to our SQL Lite Open Helper class, right? Because we are overriding this on create, right, which means SQL Lite DB, whatever we assign here, whatever we are getting here is done through this database. It will be automatically taken this context, right? Okay, fine. So let's create a table. So let's start with query writing. So let's see how we can actually create a query for this table. So let me call it as lstr query is equal to, now this is simple again. So how to create a table, like normal query, how do we write? Create, you have table, right? And then you have your table name. So we have our table name over here, which we have already given, which is table underscore name. So let's make it as const underscore table name. So till this part is okay, and then we have to mention all the columns here, right? So you have two columns to create, comma. So this is simple syntax. We have create table, table name, and you have two columns. So the first column should be integer space your primary key. So this is how we mention, right? Integer and primary key, and here we have to give the column name, which is our const underscore column ID, student ID. This is our first column, and then second column should be, we said text, right? So text is a format of the second column, let's say, and then so we'll be giving constant underscore, we have call student name is our, so this is our query, which is create table, you have table name, and so you have open and close brace where we are going to give all the columns name we have, which is column student ID. So this I want it as a integer and primary key, and second column is student name and text. This will actually form as a table. Now once it is done, then you have to run the query. Now here how to run a query is, we have a direct class of SQL DB object here. Just say db dot execute SQL and put the SQL file. This will actually create a database in your source. Right? So this is how we actually create a table in our SQL Lite. Right? So once it is done, so yeah, this will create that, and let's say db dot, we have close. So always close the database once you're done with that. Now upgrade part. Now this upgrade is something where, this is something whenever there is a old and new versions, right? Now you can see how we'll get old versions. So already whenever you create a object, right, it already have which version of database you are passing, which is a new version. Let's say if I'm making 2, so whatever I'm passing, you know that the existing database have got a version of 1. So if there is a new version, then obviously it will trigger this on upgrade. And here we are going to write what is the old version, what is the new version. If you want, you can have hold of everything, right? Now this is where you have to upgrade your table. Now upgrading part is something which you are going to drop the table and create it again. So let me create a query, lstr query is equal to, now, so what we are going to do, we are going to drop the table. So we have a direct thing called drop table, and you have table name, which is const table name. So if you want to check whether this table exists, you have direct query. If you remember, if it says if exists, so this is a normal DML operation. Drop table if exists of the table name. Fine. And then run the query, which is your db dot execute query of the query. Now this is something which you are dropping your query, and then you have to create it back again, right? I can call directly on create here. Let's create on create, and it's in the DB. So pass on the same DB instance which we are actually passing on, right? It will be sent to on create again. So let's not close here because we are not doing any DML operations. We'll close this part when we actually do the DML operation. Okay? So these two are something which is the main overrated methods of our DB handler, SQLite open helper overrated methods. So let's see how we can actually create more methods of our own. So let me call one more section as DML operation methods. Okay. Now in this DML operation methods, so first let us take an example of inserting data. Let me call public method of void, public void. So first let us say insert student, let's say, right? And yeah, let's take a name of the student. So let me call it as ASTR name. Right. The first part is insert operation. Fine. So why we are actually demanding only name is, so we have made id as a primary key, which means it will actually auto update once the row count increases, right? Now here let us see how we can actually insert the data into database. Now first thing, as I said, we have to get an hold of SQL Lite database, right? So normally we call it as DB, because this is something which normally it gives. So I'll be taking the same nomenclature here. Now here, how can I get the database instance of current DB is something. So we'll be taking up the current instance dot. Now you can see there are two different instances we have. One is writable, readable. Now let us take it as writable database. So this will actually give us a connection and give us a permission for a writable thing, right? Writable admin thing. Now if you want to read data, yes, we'll be checking out that part once we actually go ahead with the other things, right? So SQL Lite, where we have something called get writable database. Now after that, now how can we give, or how can we write a query to insert the data? Now here you don't have to write a query basically. You can directly give the values and the table name. It will directly insert the data into that table. Now how can I frame the values here? So in order to give all the values, right, we have something called content values. Let me call it as V. Let's take simple V itself. So whenever I say V, which means we are going to take up values here, is equal to, let's say I'm going to take content values. Now this content values is normally a plain object of content values class, but here you have to mention what is the column name and what is the data for that. It will act as a hash map for us, and whenever we give this to inserting table, it will actually map the content values key with the column name and the value with the row value. We have something called v dot put. Here you have a key, so let me take const of student name, because we are getting the student name here, right? ASTR name. So this will actually fill the student name, which is a column name we want, name, and then we have a value which you are passing. So this will actually create a content values. So once you are done with your content values, then insert into database, which is db dot. You have an DML operation called insert here, right? Insert table name, we have a table name here, and column null stack, we don't have any null, right? We can directly enter any value here, and then values. So values you can keep here. So these values will actually map a key with column and this with a name. And this is how we normally insert the data into our current database. By the first thing what we will be doing is we will have to convert it to writable database first, right? Now always close the database whatever you have opened. Now let me make this as global first, is equal to null, and then close it up. So finally check if your DB is not equal to null, then don't forget to do this operation, close, right? I'm just closing the connection of this, which means my writable database connection, whatever I have opened the pool, right? So we are just closing the same pool by closing it up, okay? So that's why we have to write, whenever you are doing some file operations or anything, always try to close them or dispose them or nullify them in your finally block, because this is the block which will be executed for sure, even if there is an exception happens in your try catch block, right? So this is our insert student operation. Now this will actually insert the data into table, fine. Now finally let's write retrieving the data, because once you insert, right, then obviously we have to check whether the data is inserted or not, right? So let's create a method for getting maybe all data. First we'll see how we can actually get whatever names or whatever data we have inserted, how can we get all the data into our how can we show that part, right? So let me create a method here and let me call it as array list. So let's say I'm going to take array list of strings. So here what we are going to do is, so we are going to get all the names whatever we are inserting in database. So let's say it is get all students, right? And then let me create it as try catch. Now I have, so if there is an exception, let's say I'm going to return null. So let me create a SQL Lite database object db is equal to null, and then here I have to instantiate that, which is smart db is equal to, now this time what I want to do, I want to read the data, right? So what I'll be doing, I'll just say this dot I want readable database. It will give me the readable database instance. So once it is done, let's say finally I'm gonna close this database. If db is not equal to null, then just say db dot close. Perfect. Now let me take an array list here. So this is a database creation part. So let's say I have an array list string part. Let me call it as ALAR LST data is equal to new array list. Fine. So I'm going to read the data and populate into this. So I'm going to return this data. Now let us see how can we actually call that. Now first let us create a query. So we want data, all data, let us say it is select star from, let's say it is, we have to do table name, right? So we already have a table name here, which is const or table name, right? Now here what we want here is, so we want to get the data where to be in a form of table, internal cache table. Now if it is a case of your something called Java, right? So we can actually run the select query and you can actually get the whole data into your result set or row set, right? Which will act as a internal cache tables. Fine. But here in our Android part, if you use result set or other, right, it will be heavy. So here in our Android API class, we have one option called cursor, right, which is your cursor. Cursor will directly give us, you have something called cursor here, right? So this is an interface actually, which means you can't create an object of this cursor directly, right? So let me create CRSR is equal to, you have to get the object to cursor, which means this cursor will also act as a result set for us, but one record at a time will be pointing here, right? So how can we get that is, now you have a database dot, now you have to run the query. Now you have something called raw query. So here you can see this will actually return a cursor for you, right? Let's say I want to run this, and these arguments, if you have any arguments you can give. As of now, let's say I don't have any, right? Now you have a cursor. So once you have a cursor, first always check whether the cursor is there or not, which is, if it is not null, then go ahead, right? Then let's see how to loop this. So if normally how we loop it is dot, let's say we have something called move to first. Move to first will actually give the direct values into the picture, right? Or what you can do is, yes, you can just do move to first. This will actually give you whether there are records in our cursor or not. If there is a record, it will go in, otherwise it will go out. So if it is going in, it means that you will have a loop. So let's create a do while loop here, where, so in while what we are going to do here is just say move to next. Next will take us to next record. Now here we have to get the data. Now here let us say, let me take a string. I'm gonna get string name here is equal to cursor. So now reading part is same as our result set, which is get string and your column name. Let's say I want column 1, or you can directly column here. I hope you can give column index. So are there any more? Get, we have something called, okay, you have to pass a column index itself. Get string of column index, let's say it is 1, because column indices will be 0, right? 0 is ID and we have 1 here, because I want an array list. Array list is a single dimension one, right? So here we are going to take the same. Now once it is done, just add it to our array list. Dot add of your string, right? So this will actually read everything. Now once everything is done, we have already closed the database. In the same way, you also have to close your cursor. It's very important. Let's say I'm going to take it as null, and so whenever I create a raw query, it will give me cursor. So once reading part is done, then before DB connection close, always try to close your cursor part. Not equal to null, then just say lobg cursor dot close. Right. So this will actually read the data. Perfect. Now anyways, we have two things in place now, which is inserting data and getting all the details, and you have creating data too. Anyways, this will be called whenever you create an object of this application. Fine. Now let's go to our class now. Now let's see how we can actually do the parts here. Now you can see we have an option of giving the ID here and name here, and then click on add. Perfect. So for that we have to get the texts and the add button, right? So first let's take a button object here. btn add is equal to, you have find view by id, r dot, you have id dot btn add. So let me click on add cast button. So once this is done, so let us handle the click set on click listener of new on click listener you have here. So in this case what we have to do, we have to add the data, right? We have to add the data into database. Perfect. So let's import this, and now what we'll do here is so adding data is fine here, and then let's take, so in this on click, so let's take the objects of text view. So here itself, let's take text views here. So before buttons itself, let me take a text views hold. So let's take text view. So let me take it as ltxt id, right, is equal to, let's say, let me give this part here, it's equal to null, so that I can use anywhere I want. And then you have text view txt name. Fine. Now whenever I'm clicking on this, so let's say I'm actually assigning them. r dot id dot, you have edit text id, and you have ltxt name is equal to find view by id, r dot id dot, you have edit text. Fine. So let me typecast it. Okay, perfect. Now what we are going to do here is, you have an ID, you have a name, perfect. Now, but what we have to do, whenever I click on this data, right? So whenever I click on this button, so whatever data is at that moment, I have to get, right? So let's put it here. It's much better. And now what I have to pass here is, so you don't need ID actually. Even if you want, you can pass, or normally you don't need ID because we are going, anyways we are going to get it into the data part, right? That's fine. So here we are going to take only name. Let's say we have a string. Let me create a string here. LSTR name is equal to LTXT name dot get text dot to string. So this will give us a name whole. So once it is done, now here the main thing starts. Now how can we call a database handler here, right? So you have CLS DB handler. Let me call it as again LOBJDB is equal to new database handler. Now here you can see we have to pass on the context. Now that is what I was saying. You can create construct of this class in only one way, which is you have to pass on the context here. So let me just say application context here, right? So once this application context is done, now you have a direct access to your insert data, right? Just call dot insert student of some name, which is LSTR name, right? So this will give you the whole of adding name into the database. So once it is done, now let's take one more thing here. So let's take a spinner so that we can show all the data we are adding, right? So let me take a spinner here, maybe. Somewhere here, so that we can actually show the data whatever we are adding into this, right? So let me call this spinner spinner data. Now here once we are done with addition of data, right? So just say let me create a toast so that we don't have any issues in there. Dot make text application context. We have something called okay. So
Not entry. It's custom.
No, I'm calling.
okay, fine, no issues. Yeah. So yeah, okay. So you have toast dot make test application, and what do we want to show here? Okay, added something like successful. Okay, and duration, just take a duration of some short dot show. So once it is done, let's create a separate method, right, so that we can actually fill the toast. So let me create a method here, public void. Let me call it as something load or get all data, something, right? So here what we are going to do here is, so let's say I'm going to call this method over here, so that once we insert, let's say we are going to get the data and fill it here. So here what we are going to do here is, so again we have to create a DB handler, right, which is, sorry, CLS DB handler. Let me call it as LOBJDB is equal to new DB handler from application context, right? So once this is done, then we will call something called get all students. So this will actually give us a array list, right, of strings. String, let's call it as LARR LST data is equal to, so this will give us a array list string. Now once you are done with array list, now mapping a spinner is easy part, which is array list, sorry, which is an array adapter. Let me take it as string pattern here. LOBJ adapter is equal to new. Let's take application context and resource. So again you can take a resource of Android dot r dot, let's take a layout some simple underscore, let's take a spinner item itself, which is spinner item, right? And you have your text source ID as array list. Okay, perfect. So once it is done, then load your spinner, which is your spinner. Let's take a hold of spinner. Hello, which is spinner is equal to find view by ID. You have r dot id dot spinner data, and you have spinner dot set adapter of your adapter. This will actually get all your data and load into a spinner. Fine. So I hope this will actually get to some decent insert into data and getting all the details. Perfect. Right. So let's run this part and see what happens. So once you get it spinner data, and then you can actually check that out. Perfect. So here we'll do one thing. Whenever we are getting the data, right here, which is our toast. So whenever we are getting data and filling it in toast, we'll do one thing. We'll just loop through this data and make a toast here. So let's create for each data in our LST data. So here let's make a toast so that we can see it here. Application context, and just say string duration is toast dot for short dot show. Right. Okay. So let's run the project now. Android project. And then close all these.
Srinath?
Yeah. You have to go.
Is it possible to store this database in external storage instead of internal storage?
No. This comes with your inbuilt operating system of Android, right? No, you can't keep this in your external storage.
External storage.
No. Then you have to create a separate instance of third-party database in your external storage, maybe. Yeah.
So
Again, because whenever we're talking about external storage, right? Maybe some people don't go for external storage. Then, right? Then again, it will be a problem.
Because internal storage is very small amount, like maybe 8 GB, but in external storage is 32 GB, 64 GB.
No, we never know, right? Maybe people are not going for external storage. So 8 GB is more than enough for them, right? Then yeah, you can't decide on that, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
No issues. So let's take example. Let's say Apple first. Click on add. Now you can see Apple here, right? Can you see? So it got added, and I'm actually getting from the database. Is it clear, guys? And so whatever we added, right? So it got added. So you can just add one more.
What about the ID, Srinath?
I am not getting the ID. You want me to get ID? Okay, fine. I'll get the ID. No issues. I just didn't add the ID. That's fine. We'll get the ID to string lstr ID is equal to, you have a cursor dot get string of 0. This will give us an ID. Now let's say I'm gonna append these two plus some semicolon and ID. Okay, I'm gonna show this in this way, and perfect. Let me run this again. So we'll do one thing, whenever it loads, right? Okay, that's fine. Whenever I click on add, first see the first DML operation, and then we'll see it tomorrow, the remaining part and all. Okay, so let me give some other name, add Right now you can see there will be two. One is your click on this. Let me show. Yeah, you can see we have one, right, and you have second one which is 3. Right now, even if I close this app, right, now let's say I'm closing this app and I'm switching the phone off and switching it on again. So let me go to the project, app. So what is the app here? We have something called SQL Lite. SQL Lite, right? This is the project name. SQL Lite. So right. So when I click on one more here, let's say I'm gonna place one more name here. Add. Go back. Here you can see one apple, and you can see 2 3, and you can see these 3. Right. You'll have all the details you want. Fine. So this is how we actually work with initial adding up of data into things. Now we have more. We have update, we have delete, we have getting specific ones and all, right? So we'll see it in our next class. So till this part, any doubts, guys?